Hello everyone, this is Austin at Bates Nursery and Garden Center. Today I'm going to teach you how to repot a fiddle-leaf fig. Now there's a few steps that we need to do before we actually get started repotting. So the first step is picking out your tree. I've got one here, a beautiful little tree. We love fiddle-leaf figs for their nice bright crisp green leaves. It's probably the most popular houseplant on earth. It also probably has some of the most problems out there as well. So we're going to try to avoid that and I'm going to teach you how. Okay, so the next step in replanting is figuring out what size pot you want to use. We don't want to go too much bigger than what the nursery pot already is. So this size right here is about right if you ask me to put into this container. It's going to allow for longevity. We want this plant to live for a long time, and they will in a large enough pot. So we don't want to go too much bigger than what this size pot is though, because generally we tend to overwater that. It stays too wet down below. So avoid that. Next step is finding a container that has a hole in it. That is pretty crucial. So we're going to tip this up and let you see it's got a real nice wide drain hole to it. It's going to allow for all that excess water to fall through that pot and not stick around in the soil. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to need while repotting a fig is our soil. So we have a product here that we call Proganics I. It's an indoor potting mix, and it starts with coconut coir, which is a more environmentally friendly product instead of peat moss. It pretty much does the same thing that peat moss does. It adds for moisture retention a little bit, but it also allows for a light mix so that water can drain. We really want fiddle-leaf figs to go dry in between waterings, so this helps with that. It keeps it to where the moisture level is good, and then as the water slowly seeps out of the pot to the bottom, that's whenever we're going to add our water back and fill it back up. This is an excellent product that we sell here. We sell all sorts of soil amendments that you can find here at Bates Nursery. Okay, so the final thing we're going to need for potting up a fiddle-leaf fig is access to water. And I don't mean just like a single little watering can. It's going to take a lot more water than that. So I've drug a hose over here. I've got a watering wand where I can control the pressure on it. And I've got the water close. Right after we finish potting this fig, we're going to need to give it water. And we're not going to need to give it a lot. So make sure you have good access to a lot of water. So another thing we need to talk about is when to actually repot your fiddle-leaf fig. Right now, this plant is a little bit root bound. We'll kick it out of its pot. And really, it doesn't have that bad of a root system. This plant could live in that little pot for really a good amount of time longer. But the thing is that we don't want to, bring it into our home into this ugly black nursery pot. We want to move it up. So if you want to do that, you can do it at any time. Just know that if it does start to get really spiraling roots and it's not taking a lot of water in, then that's the perfect time to start repotting it. Next step is we're going to pot this thing. I'm going to bring the pot closer to me. Let that sit. We're going to get some dirt down in this pot. Now, a lot of people are really loose about plantings. I'm totally opposite. I have way more success whenever I really get a lot of soil down in the pot. So we get some in there at first, and then we're going to press it in. The edges are really the most important that we want to get pressed in there. That makes sure that it's not, because a lot of times plants have a tendency to, when they get in there and they start rooting, they the dirt kind of squeezes in on itself, and then it opens up the edges. And when that happens, after you water, it goes to the edge of the pot and it runs right down and out. So we want to make sure that originally you press it in nice and tight. So we got the first layer in. We're going to get another layer in. Go ahead and empty that bag. And then once again, work this in flat and then press the edges. All right, so we got that about where we want it. Get some of this stuff off the top here. I'm gonna kind of mess up this root ball just a little bit. You don't have to cut any roots or anything, but it is good practice to kind of loosen them up. This goes with almost anything you ever repot. All right, so it looks good. I'm gonna see where we're at. So I can see right now I'm a little high. What I don't want is this root ball being above this, obviously. We want this to be about 2 to 3 inches lower than the pot. That way we can water and we can fill it up. Take this back out for a second. I'm gonna work a little hole in it, making sure the edges are still tight. Get myself down far enough where I think we're good. So there we go. We're gonna kind of work it in to that soil and get it nice and tight. We also want to step back and make sure we're straight, which we are not anywhere close right now. So let's turn this, and you can plant a plant, with its root ball. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. What you got to do is make sure the stem looks straight. Looks pretty straight to me. Center of the pot, where we want to be. And as you can see, my root ball is not flat anymore because I had to make this stem straight. So I had to plant this at an angle a little bit. Perfectly fine to do that. All right, I've got enough dirt in there to where I can start packing it in. So I'll take the dirt that's in there and I really press it tight around this root ball. I think this is where people mess up the most. They really don't give it a good start right off the bat. Got to press that dirt in around it. This is going to seat this plant down into this pot well. It's not wiggling around. All right, so we got that pressed in there firm. As you can see, it doesn't really move after I release it. Now, all we got to do is add more. As you can see, I buried the stem a little bit. Obviously, I'm not going to leave that like that. We're going to get all soil away from the stem. Get it down to where it's level, and then press those edges. You'll have much better success with these plants if you do this, because it keeps water in the actual soil. It doesn't just run down the sides and run away from you. It's actually being taken in. All right, we're pretty close. I think I'm just going to add just a little bit more. That's about all we need. Now, when it comes to fertilizing fiddle-leaf figs, it is good practice to do that when they're actively growing in the spring generally. Now, most nursery stock you're going to get has added fertilizer already in it. Almost everything we get has it already. So right off the rip, you don't have to add it, until it's actively growing and rooted in. Okay, so it's been planted. Now, the next step is the most crucial, and it's the watering, and it's the initial watering. Like I mentioned before, fiddle-leaf fig likes to stay dry, but not when you first replant it. When you first replant it, you got to know this soil has no moisture in it at all. So we've got to really soak it to get moisture around this whole root zone to keep this plant growing. And like I've mentioned, the first one is the most crucial. So, like I mentioned before, this pot has a good drain hole to it, so it's going to drain. Any excess water is going to go out of the bottom of this pot. So we've got to really fill it up at first. All right. So we water and we let it be. You see the bubbles kind of coming up, it's seeping through there. What you see is that I packed this thing in nice and tight, so the water is draining in slowly. It's filling in all of that soil that's down below it. And that's what we want. If you see water just blowing through a pot, just draining just really quickly, you know that soil does not have enough time to take up the water. So a slow drain is what you want to see. So when it comes to fiddle-leaf figs as well, watering seems to be the hardest thing for people to figure out. How much to do it, when to do it. There is no certain time I can tell you, like every 2 weeks water it. Every fig's different. It depends on light exposure, which you want to give figs a lot of light, just so you know that. But for the most part, if your fig looks good and it's happy and it's green and it looks nice, it's generally fine. It's this watering that's the most crucial. You're going to see issues the quickest without doing this properly. So I got to go ahead and do this again. All the excess water either is making soil contact or it's drained through the pot. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you learned a little something today. If you have any questions or concerns and need some help, we have specialists out here at Bates Nursery all the time to help you out.